I'm here today with Richard Triggs, and we are going to talk recruitment and how it relates to the modern workplace, how our senior executives changing their views on the way the workplace works for them as a hybrid or flexible workplace. So, really interested to dig into Richard's background. And after 15 years of experience in recruitment, Richard, I think you're going to bring a lot of value to this conversation. Thrilled that we can talk. Looking forward to talking about your books, etc. So tell us a bit about your background. Where have you come from, and how did you get into this work?
Firstly, Nina, thanks very much for the opportunity to have a chat to you. I'm looking forward to this conversation. Certainly, flexible and hybrid workplaces is talked about very regularly in my world nowadays. Good to talk to an expert about it. I own a business we're called Arete Executive. We're an executive search firm. We are retained by companies to go out and headhunt particular people for vacancies. We work across a broad range of industries and all different role families, from early level leadership roles right through to CEO and board roles. How did I get into this work? When I finished high school, I had grand aspirations to be a rock and roll star. And I toured Australia playing guitar and singing for about 4 years, and
Amazing.
ended up in Melbourne chasing a record deal that we missed out to Keith Urban. And I
Oh,
think that at that point, I rang my parents and said, "Oh, I think I need to come home and go back to uni. This music stuff's all a bit too hard." I went back, did a marketing HR degree, worked in the building services industry. Then in my early 30s, started doing an executive MBA. And like most people who do an MBA, started to think about, what do I want to do when I grow up? So I went to see a recruiter that I'd been a client of, and that person said to me, "Oh, Richard, have you ever thought about recruitment for yourself?" And before you knew it, I became a recruiter. I worked for 1 year for what was at the time the biggest recruitment company in the world. Loved recruitment, didn't really like their culture. Then I worked for the largest privately owned recruitment company in Queensland. I was there for about 5 years or so. Last 18 months there was on their board, and then not long after that started Arete Executive. So started my business on the 1st of February 2009, the height of the GFC. People were saying to me, "Richard, you're crazy to start a recruitment company now," which was definitely true. But fortune favors the brave. And 15 years later, having been through a GFC, a mining industry collapse, a pandemic, looming international wars, etc. It'd be lovely to have 1 year where everything was just nice and calm. And they said, "Look, it's just going to be a cool year. Just have fun, make some money. Don't nothing crazy to deal with." But I don't know if we're going to have that anytime soon.
no. Speaking of which, how are you seeing economic conditions in Australia where you're based affecting the job market, particularly in that senior recruitment space?
So if we talk about in the GFC, we started our business and everybody's, "Oh, the sky is falling, the world is going to end." And 6 months later, the world was as it always has been. And then the same thing in the mining industry collapse, same thing in COVID, at the beginning of COVID. "Oh my God, the world is ending." And literally within a few months, back to a very buoyant employment market. So what am I experiencing now? We are having record month after record month. Clients are very optimistic about the future. Certainly, if you were in a B2C business and you were selling expensive things in a environment with increasing interest rates, then that may cause you to think about your business strategy for next year. But I made a decision during COVID to turn the news off, because my business was doing fine. My clients' businesses were doing fine. And then I'd watch the news and it was so unbelievably depressing that I just thought, I've got to just get away from that noise. And it seems to be the case that the media just loves to present the worst possible picture, when in fact, I would say 19 out of 20 CEOs or business owners I talk to, they're having a good time. And what are their biggest challenges? Probably one of their biggest challenges is always how to attract and retain good people.
Mm.
If you're in a buoyant market, that's a challenge. If you're in a tough market, that's a challenge. If you're in a tough market, you need good people to help you to get through that tough market. So this war for talent that they talk about, which is actually a term that I don't really agree with, even though my new book is called Winning the War for Talent, it's been a constant theme for 20 years in recruitment.
It's a really interesting point that doesn't matter what's happening, There's always a need to get great people and to be able to retain them and keep them as well.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And it's been really interesting to watch some of the trends. So perhaps to preempt a little bit what we'll be talking about today. For example, pre-COVID, if we were recruiting a CFO role for a manufacturing company, which we've just been doing, and you were talking to potential candidates, they would say, "Oh, you know what? It would be so awesome if maybe I could work half a day a fortnight from home. If I could have that flexibility, that would be so good." Do you think that the employer would possibly give me the ability to work from home maybe a day a fortnight? Now they're saying, unless I'm working from home 3 days a week, I'm not interested.
amazing.
So it's massively impacted employers' ability to attract and retain good people because now people are used to having that ability. We're currently recruiting 2 roles for a company in Tasmania. And for those people who are unfamiliar with Australia, Tasmania is a little island down the bottom, and their main capital city is called Hobart. And this company want a new head of finance and new head of procurement. And they've said, "Richard, we are happy to have anybody based anywhere in Australia as long as they're in close proximity to an airport so they can come down. We have no expectation, there is no obligation that they would even move to Tasmania, let alone come into our office." Now, that would have been unheard of 4 years ago.
Completely different, isn't it? It's changed so much.
Mm.
And then that talent pool, I imagine you might be quite busy because now you'll get a huge number of candidates for that role. You could end up, you've got your pick across the country of people from anywhere.
Yeah, it is. We're in situations where we're having to say to clients, if you stipulate that you need somebody in your workplace 5 days a week, know that you are dramatically reducing the pool of talent.
Mm.
So as an employer, that's your choice if you feel that's important, but understand the ramifications of that.
Yeah. And then do you see employers, every employer is going to be different and they'll have a different culture, they'll have a different response, they'll have different systems where they're set up for flexible and hybrid working well, or they know that they're struggling with it. What's the sense you get around how well your clients are adapting to it? And what are they saying on the client side around flexible and hybrid work?
I think intelligent employers are realizing that they need to be flexible to accommodate what's happening into the market. The constant concern is, how do you maintain culture
Mm,
when your team aren't meeting in a workplace?
mm,
And certainly, if I talk about my own business, so I moved my entire team home a year before COVID because I just got to the point where I couldn't see why I was demanding that somebody would travel an hour into the city to sit in an office all day and then spend an hour going home. They could be much more productive working from home. And so 1st of July 2019, well before COVID, I made that decision for my business. Now, my business has definitely, in some respects, suffered as a result of that choice. Because my team is spread out, they're working from home. I have people in Southeast Queensland, but I have people in Tasmania and Sydney and on the Gold Coast, etc. From a productivity point of view and from a quality point of view, I know that if we were in the same office and I could literally hear them talking and be available to answer questions immediately, I would have a more productive team. I would probably have a more united team culturally. But the reality is the benefits of having people working from home in terms of the kind of people that I can attract outweigh that. So it is constantly, it's a give and take scenario.
fascinating.
Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off. Yeah, Richard, what were you going to say?
In what respect? Why is it fascinating?
If I think about that motivation from an employer perspective of you can get people from anywhere, then you also know that you're saving them 2 hours travel a day.
Completely.
And there was pre-COVID, there was some amazing research coming out of Cisco and other places showing that people tend to give back about 60% of their day, their travel time to
Hmm.
their work. They're just more engaged in the work. They tend to deliver over and above to make sure that the work gets done as well. So there was a real, you could argue that time was spent on covering up the gaps in communication as well, that there potentially people's stress may have gone up because if systems aren't really well established and the team function isn't actually that good, then people are having to work harder to get the same amount done. You could say that. But I guess there's a bottom line under what you're saying that is it's effectively a disruption, because disruption happens when something is good enough. It doesn't have to be a perfect replacement. So you're saying the team that you have now, where they are, where they've been, where they're located, the way that it's working for you is a better overall. The balance has tipped towards staying that way rather than, even despite the challenges around communication and productivity. So it's a disruption because it's got you into, it's not a perfect replacement, but it's got you into a situation that's actually in some ways overall better.
Yeah, and I think that's true of any business decision you make. The type of clients you want to work with, the types of products or services you want to sell, how you want to engage your team, it's always a compromise. But for me, again, so for example, I'd love to employ people who need work-life flexibility, whether that's around having a young family or doing study or other extracurricular things. So I know that the time that they're spending working for me, they're highly productive because they've got other things to do. And I know that the fact that I can accommodate that means that they're more appreciative and I will have better attention. So I've not had a regrettable loss from my business probably in at least 6 or 7 years. On the other side of the coin, though, I know that if we were sitting in an office and I could listen to them talking on the phone, I would be able to pick up things where there were some skill gaps that I could help them with. But because I don't have that direct observational experience, I'm limited in terms of my ability to really have oversight on the quality of work that's happening. So again, how do you compensate for that? You can have team meetings online and we get together socially once a month and we're going out to lunch actually on Thursday and doing things like that. So I think as an employer, you just have to make the best call that works for you. Coming back to, it's our more traditional employers who are saying, for example, I want a CFO to work in my manufacturing facility and they need to be on site every day and they need to be in company uniform every day. Now, a lot of recruiters are merely order takers. So they'll go, oh, okay, sure thing. But I think a proper recruiter or somebody like yourself in the consulting space, we're going to say, why is that necessary? Now, what is it about this person being on site every day that's important to you? And if they could fulfill the job equally as well, if not better, working from home, and that enabled you to attract a better quality of person, are you open to considering that? So it's just reflecting back the benefits versus the costs that employers go, actually, now that I think about it, that's right. The other thing that's interesting in the professional services space, particularly accounting and law, etc., is a lot of the younger people coming through. The older partners in these accounting practices are going, oh, these young generation of accountants, they've got no loyalty. They always want to get paid way more than they're worth too quickly. They always want to be promoted before they're ready to be promoted. And the younger generation, aren't they terrible? And so what I say is, firstly, let's look at it from the perspective of a younger person. When I finished university, I'm 55. So when I finished university, it was get a job, buy a house, get married, have kids, be a good employee, work hard, and you'll be looked after. So younger people now would go, and I'm generalizing, I can't buy a house. Buying a house is completely unaffordable. And also, I don't have such a pressure to move out of home because mum and dad are happy for me to stay here. Again, when we were younger, well, not you, but my age, we wanted to get out of home because apart from anything else, we wanted our girlfriend to stay the night. So it's like, we got to get out of house as quickly as possible. Now parents are saying, oh, it's fine. Your girlfriend can come and stay the night, or your boyfriend or whatever. In fact, they could even potentially move in. So the pressure to move out is not there, coupled with the impost of, can I actually afford to buy a house? The second thing is they go, why would I be loyal to my employer when I saw what happened to my parents? My dad worked for Rio Tinto for 25 years, and the minute there's a GFC, he got made redundant. Or stories like that.
Mm.
And why am I going to listen to these older people? Let's look at the world and global warming and international wars and all of this terrible stuff. Why should I trust and respect those people? So
Mm.
therefore, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I know I've got unlimited opportunity as an employee. The world is my oyster. I can work remotely. I can work in Brisbane for a client, an employer who's based in Sydney or even in Wellington. So the employer has to, instead of going, oh, those younger people, they have to go, you know what, this is the world we live in now. Unless I'm prepared to change the way we do business to accommodate that, then I could be out of business.
Yeah.
That's just reality.
And you're hearing that from your senior executives that you're placing, because that sounds like that's a large cohort, a large group of your candidates are in that executive space. Are you hearing a difference there between what executives are saying and what, say, manager level is saying? Of what they're looking for.
Look, I think if you're talking about managers from probably more of that mid-level management moving into the executive space, largely they're in the space of managing rather than leading.
Mm.
And so it's up to really the board, the CEO and the executive leadership team to set the tone and set the strategy. Pretty hard if you're a operations manager on a site working for an industrial company to be able to institute this change unless it's being championed at the ELT level.
Tell us about your book. Tell us about Winning the War for Talent. What's the focus of it? Why did you write it? And what are you hoping it'll achieve for people?
Okay, great. So back in 2015, I wrote a book called Uncover the Hidden Job Market. The main reason that I wrote that was because at the time I was getting 15 plus people a week who'd contact me and they go, oh, Richard, I've been talking to my friend Nina and I'm looking for a new job. Can I meet with you to get some advice about my job search? And of course, if I met with all of these people every week, I would get no work done. So what I did instead was I said, look, I can't meet with you one-on-one, but let me give you a free book. And I run these webinars and I do a whole heap of other things to educate job seekers without, obviously it took a lot of time to write a book, but it saves me a tremendous amount of time as well. Now, and that book's gone on to be very successful. Now realizing that employers who are typically great at running their core business, but often they're not very good when it comes to hiring and retaining talent. And in many cases, they might be outsourcing that candidate attraction, the hiring process, to either an in-house recruitment team or a third-party recruitment company. And those in-house recruitment teams or third-party recruitment companies are not very good. So the goal of my book is to educate employers how they can hire far more successfully and how they can retain people far more successfully. So I'll just give you one simple example. If you were to go to a job board and you were to look at ads that have been written by in-house recruiters, where a company is looking to recruit a general manager, or it could be really any level of role, 19 out of 20 times, at least, there'll be nobody's name or phone number on the ad for a candidate to ring up and ask any questions. And when I've spoken at conferences and I talk to HR professionals and in-house recruitment people, I say, why don't you put your name and phone number on the ad? And they say, because we don't want candidates to ring
I
us.
want them to call. I was just going to say that.
And so I was talking to a head of HR, head of recruitment for an engineering company, and they said, oh, Richard, we've got 40 mission critical roles that we can't fill. And so I said, well, okay, let's have a look at your ads. Why isn't your name and phone number on there? We don't want candidates to ring up. So, oh, hang on a second. You want to fill the jobs. What if I'm a great candidate and I read an ad and I go, that role looks interesting. I'd like to know more before I decide if I'm going to apply, especially if it's with one of my competitors, because I want to make sure from a confidentiality point of view, I'm only applying for a job if I'm really excited about it. Who can I ring? Nobody to ring. So what do? They don't apply. Or alternatively, they apply And then they say to me 8 weeks later, oh, Richard, I applied for this job with ABC Company. It's been 8 weeks. I've had no acknowledgement of my application. I have no idea as to whether I'm being considered for the role or not. And there's nobody that I can ring up and ask. How damaging is that to an employer of your employer of choice brand? So what my book is, it's essentially a methodology to make sure that you're doing things intelligently and doing them well. And if you continue to employ in-house recruiters who don't put their name and phone number on the ad, then you've got to really ask the question, why am I employing these people? If you don't want to talk to candidates, do a different job.
Yeah.
That's just one simple thing. There's this talk about the war for talent. Oh, look, this is the best of the candidates we've been able to find because there's a war for talent. There's no war for talent. It's just that some people are good at recruiting and most people are terrible at it. Similarly, there was this talk about the Great Resignation. After COVID, oh, there's this Great Resignation, all these people are leaving. That's not actually the case. What happened during COVID, there were a lot of people who wanted to change jobs. However, they thought it was too risky. What if I go to this new company and I get sick? Or what if I go to this new company and they're negatively impacted? I'm just going to ride COVID out, safe harbor in a storm. And once COVID's behind us, then I'll go for a new job. Excuse me. So it's not that there was any Great Resignation. It was just that there was a bottleneck, and that bottleneck's now been removed. But an employer or a line manager or whatever will say, oh, I can't retain my people. Oh, there's a Great Resignation. That's just an excuse like the war for talent it is. If you are good at retaining your people by understanding what do they want and then giving it to them, there's no resignation because they won't leave.
Yeah.
My book is essentially me just giving my view of simple things that you can do in your business that are going to have a massive impact, because the competitive advantage you have by being able to attract and retain top people is phenomenal. If you can do that better than your competitors, your business is going to be much more successful. You're going to have a much more enjoyable life, and your team are going to love working for you. Yeah. Who wouldn't want that?
Who wouldn't want that? Absolutely. It'd be, I guess, I'd be fascinated to find out how I'd be fascinated to hear whether people at that level have what's the average tenure? What's the average length of time? I've heard stats previously about 18 months is now the standard amount of time that you can expect someone to be in a role. Do you see that playing out? Is that just a fact pulled out of thin air? Or
look, I did research in preparation for my book. So on average, 30 to 35% of people changed employer a year. So if you play that out, that means that people are changing their employers every 3 years. 2020 or 2021, PwC wrote a report called Managing the Great Resignation. I think it was called something like that. I'm sure if you Google it, you'll find it. And they'll say, oh my God, there's a Great Resignation. 30 to 35% of people are changing jobs in any 1 year. It's exactly the same. It hasn't changed at all. Certainly from an employer's point of view, they want to see longevity. But by the same token, if you are in a business and you are promoted into more senior roles, then that is regarded as you advancing your career. So far better for you if you're in an organization that you enjoy working for and that offer you those opportunities for further professional development, that you would stay in that organization for at least 3 to 5 years plus. But by the same token, when I first got into recruitment 20 years ago, if somebody saw a CV, they went, oh, this person's changed employers every 18 months. There must be something wrong with them. Now employers are more, I wouldn't say they have a preference for that, but they're more open-minded about it. Likewise, when I first started in recruitment, there was definitely a sort of a view that once somebody's mid-50s, they're probably getting a bit old and a bit tired, and I don't know that we want to hire somebody of that age. Now, when I take on a recruitment assignment, I say to the client, look, I'm not really meant to ask this question, but what do you think's too young and what do you think's too old? And they all say, oh, I think you're too young. Let's say it's a leadership role. They probably need to have had at least 5 years leadership experience. They're probably at least 30 or whatever it is. But when it comes to too old, I would say in almost every instance, the employer says, as long as they've got enough petrol in the tank, they're still keen to work and learn and contribute. We don't care if they're 50, 60. In fact, we placed somebody in a global role fairly recently who's 72. So a
Mm.
lot of that ageism has come out of the market. Now,
Mm.
granted, I'm working at the executive level, but as an employer, because I know that your podcast is aimed more towards the employer, you are able to buy a lot of what we call a scar resume. People who've been through the wars, they've seen the ups and downs, they've learnt. And the reality is people now in their mid-60s, even their mid-70s, are still very vital.
Mm.
So why not take advantage of bringing those people into your business and benefiting from all of their experience?
Mm.
Similarly, from a male-female point of view, employers want to hire the best quality talent that they can. There is definitely a preference for gender diversity at the leadership level, particularly at the board level now. And so one of the things that I really try and do is encourage women in particular to take a risk and apply for a job that they may not feel quite qualified for, but knowing that the employer would like to have more women in those roles, they are very supportive of training and developing female talent into those senior leadership roles. Whereas
Mm.
historically, a lot of women, again, a generalization, might see a job ad and go, I've only really got 8 of the 10 things that they're looking for, therefore I'm not going to apply. Whereas a guy looks at the ad, he goes, I've got 3 out of those 10 things, I'm the best candidate.
Gosh.
So
I have
it's
noticed that. I've noticed that. I've heard people comment on it and I've seen it myself amongst colleagues. And yeah, it's one of the things I think that we could really change in perspective around maybe it's women that change their perspective, maybe it's employers in general. I think there's something I've noticed that's a really awesome key here, which is the Richard Branson approach to the world, where he says, if someone offers you a fantastic opportunity and you don't know if you can do it, say yes and work it out as you go. You say yes and work out later how to do it. And it's a different, sometimes some of the best opportunities are on the other side of that, where you say, look, here's an opportunity that it looks like I could, if they want me, then I'll be able to work out. It's having that self-confidence to think I'll be able to work it out. I'll be able to work out how to do it.
Yeah. So I
Mm.
think, in theme with your podcast, as an employer, it's a fantastic time.
Mm.
You've got an ability to recruit people into your team who can work remotely, really from anywhere in the world. You've got the ability to bring in older people. And again, coming back to women who may have taken some time out during their career to be a mum, they're coming back into the workplace with still a tremendous runway. Let's say they come back into the workplace at 40, there's still 20 years there that you can take advantage of as an employer and bring those people into your team. People want to work far more flexibly. So you're not limited to, it must be a 38-hour a week, full-time Monday to Friday job. People might want to only work 5 hours a day or 2 days a week or what. So it's tremendous for employers to be able to actually craft the workplace that they want that's going to most sustain the success of their business, as long as they're prepared to be adaptable and flexible in relation to the market.
Yeah. And tell me, as a leader yourself with your own business and you're working alongside leaders, what have you learned in your journey that has led you to this point where you were quite proactive about flexibility for your team? What do you think influenced you as a leader to get to that point of flexibility yourself?
Before we started the podcast, you said to me, I think you said, you need to think about something that happened that was really, in hindsight, cataclysmic. Or so I would say in that regard, what I've really learned to do is to trust my intuition, to hire well and fire fast. And I think there have been plenty of times in my career, especially in my business, where I've hired people, I've intuitively known fairly quickly that they were a poor hire. However, I've chosen to keep them on because, oh, they'll come good. They'll come good. And again, this whole thing about working flexibly where they're working from home and I don't have line of sight all day, every day on what they're doing, it is harder to make those judgment calls about, do I retain this person? But if it doesn't quickly feel that they're a good hire, I've learned to let them move on elsewhere in their career. I think one of the things from a flexibility point of view that really came home to me was when I became a parent. Prior to becoming a parent myself, working in companies where there'd be single mums who might say, oh, look, I can't get in time for the 8 o'clock meeting, but I can be there for 8:30. And I understood at a sort of a theoretical level that being a single mum must be hard in terms of managing these various responsibilities. Then when I became a parent, I went, holy crap, this is
Not
hard
just
enough to
hard.
do with two parents, let alone trying to do it on your own. And
Yeah.
so suddenly my appreciation for the compromises and the challenges and the things that single parents have to do escalated unbelievably. For example, I love to employ young parents, not young in terms of their age, but with young families, because I can say to them, look, drop the kids off at school, start for me at 9:30, finish at 2:30, do your kid stuff. If you need to and you want to, log on again in the evening for a couple of hours, work from home, and they're fantastically loyal and productive, wonderful people. They're very grateful for being given that opportunity. And it's, again, if I'd said to them, you must be in the office at 8 and you must finish at 5, not only if they wanted the job would they have to make so many compromises from their personal life's perspective, I probably wouldn't attract or retain them.
Mm.
Yeah, I'd say that's one of the biggest ones for me.
It's that motivation piece, isn't it? You've given them a really strong why. You've helped them to be engaged for the whole time they're with you because they have a very strong reason for wanting to be at your workplace.
For sure.
Yeah. And in the sense, do you think it's fair to say it wouldn't work if every employer was offering exactly the same conditions? Because it really positions you as a unique opportunity. It positions you as a forward-thinking, proactive employer, and that's where those great candidates, the fantastic employees, are really looking for that kind of an environment.
Oh, look, is it a competitive advantage? I think it is.
Yeah,
But by the same token, would I want other employers not to offer that?
of course.
I
Yeah, I
think
didn't mean
every
it like that.
employer,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
every employer should do their best. I talk about in my book, leading effectively is being able to get a fine balance between love and accountability.
Mm,
So if I love my team too much, or not too much, if I love my team a lot, but I don't hold them accountable, they become soft, unproductive, and my business suffers. If there's too much accountability but not enough love, they become brittle and it's hard to retain. They can often become very self-interested in terms of achieving KPIs for their own bonuses or things like that. So the absolute sweet spot is being able to get that nice meeting place between, yes, you need to love your team, but you need to also hold them to account.
mm.
People want to perform well. They want to be well regarded for doing good work. So being able to say to an employee, what can I do to create an environment that will enable you to be productive and do good work and enjoy it? And then when they tell you, as long as their aspirations or expectations are manageable, then it's my responsibility to give them that. But also they have a responsibility to give me what I want. I think as business owners, often we try and be the nice person, the good boss who's all warm
The
cuddles.
love
And
side, as you painted it.
again, I talk a lot about this in my book, is what are some of the simple methodologies you can bring into your business to ensure that you are getting that accountability, you are getting those outcomes you need. Because at the end of the day, if I don't get what I need as the owner, I can't employ anybody anyway.
And that's where I was going to go with that, is that if you aren't running a successful business that's
Yeah.
sustainable, if you aren't in that position of being a sustainable business, which happens when people are productive, when they are engaged, when you're running your workforce well, then ultimately that's not kind either, to just allow people to deteriorate the quality of of the work. So
That's
yeah,
right. It's like that old saying, which is a bit naff. It's how can you love somebody else until you love yourself? So what I want is I want my heart to be so filled with love for myself that it spills over into the hearts of others. So in this context, it said, I want my business to be so successful that I can in turn create an environment that's going to support people to achieve their full potential.
that's exactly the reason I'm in business. Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. That's it. That's such a powerful thing about work when you think we're doing it at least 8 hours a day. Usually it's a purpose, it's connection with other people. It can take your mind off things that aren't as good in the rest of life, or it can be an amazing, optimistic experience. So yeah, providing that environment where people can develop, they can achieve what they're setting out to achieve, I think is just it's almost like a basic human right, it feels like to me. This is how things are meant to be, is that we've got great work, we've got a great environment to do it in.
Indeed.
Amazing. On that note, Richard, before you go, just let the audience get to know you a little bit more by understanding your favorite food or meal. There's something about food. We all love food.
Fortunately, this video is just of me from sort of shoulders upwards, because I can tell you I'm a bit of a cuddly chap because I love food and I love to cook. I love to entertain, and I do a lot of food related events. So I run in Brisbane this thing called the Long Lunch Club. I ran it for 25 business owners and CEOs last week. Lunch started at 12:30. I think I got home at about 9 o'clock.
That's a very long lunch.
It is very long lunch. I'm actually out to lunch 3 times this week with clients and with my teams. I love food. So what do I love? I think it's all good. It's just
any good food. It sounds like the company matters to you as well.
the company is the most important part. But when people say, look, if you could only eat one cuisine for the rest of your life, how could you choose? Because it's just all so yummy.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I certainly enjoy a nice glass of wine, or my favorite drink, pre-dinner drink, is a Negroni. So every time I have an event, I always post on Facebook a photograph of me with a Negroni saying, okay, let the lunch begin. I know it's going to be a good lunch.
That as well. That is also one of my favorites. So
they are the best. Yes, no, love food. I'm taking my children to Vietnam for 2 weeks in the beginning of January, and I'm really excited about going and eating their yummy food.
Yeah, amazing. Absolutely. Those fantastic sandwiches and soups and wow, so much. Incredible. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing these insights. And where can people get hold of the book or reach out to you? How can they get in touch?
Sure. Obviously, I'm on LinkedIn, but if you all send me LinkedIn connection requests, the maximum number of connections you can have on LinkedIn is 30,000, and I'm constantly sitting at around 29,000. I have to be fairly selective about who I connect with on LinkedIn because I literally have no room. But certainly, if you're a senior leader and you want to connect with me, feel free to send me a connection request. My business, Arete Executive. If you want a copy of the book, Uncover the Hidden Job Market, you can go to their website and you can download a copy there for free. If you want to buy a hard copy, you can buy it on Amazon or whatever it might be. The new book, Winning the War for Talent, will be published around February next year. Once again, it is my intention to give that away to employers and hiring managers for free. I don't write these books for money. My podcast, the Arete Podcast, is on Spotify and iTunes. And certainly if you need any support from a recruitment point of view, I'd love to have a chat to you about that. Even though we're based in Brisbane, we work nationally. In fact, we've been working in New Zealand, the US, the UK, and other countries this year. It's terrible to say one of the great things about COVID, the silver lining for us with COVID was now that we're very comfortable having a Zoom or a Teams-based relationship, as Nina, you and I are doing today, our geographic footprint just exploded overnight. So we picked up one particular client during COVID and we've recruited over 200 roles for them in the last 2 years, all over Australia, and it's been amazing. So anyway, look, I'd love to chat to anybody who's interested about recruitment, but certainly from a career job search perspective, there's a whole bunch of resources that we give people for free. And if you want those, just contact me through our website and we can make all of those available to you.
That is amazing. It sounds giving a book away for free is a unique gift. There's a huge amount of work that goes into that. I know people who have just almost cartoon-like emerged from the ashes of writing their book and into back into normal life. Sometimes it's just such a mammoth effort. So yeah, that's really remarkable.
Good. All right. Lovely to chat to you, Nina. And I really look forward to connecting with you again.
Thank you, Richard. Thanks for being on the podcast.
My pleasure.